This is one of the last LD Italian scooters, but unlike the normal scooter, this is an electric start. Now they made 3 versions of the electric start, 1954 through to this one. But by the time they came to this one, which was the Mark III version, they were confident enough then to not even put a kickstart on it. And this is the plate here which would have had the kickstart. And how they worked this, where they had the clutch bell and the little starter motor ran here underneath, and it just literally drove the clutch bell. 2 6-volt batteries in the back to make a 12-volt system. Same ignition as a car, so you had 12-volt lights, but you had them as soon as the engine, as soon as it was switched on and it charged the battery up. After that, they went very quickly to this model, which was in 1957 came out, which is a TV Series 1. Now this was a flagship for Lambretta. They were then competing with Vespa, which had Vespa GS 160. Now this came out as a 175 version. In fact, it was actually 170, but they called it a 175. It was a completely different design. You had now 4-speed gearbox. A big advantage because with these 3-speed LDs, you came to a hill and it was very, very difficult to, if you had a steep incline, you were down to first, up to second, down to first. With a 4-speed gearbox, it was much better. Unfortunately, the layout of this engine wasn't that good. They had a centre kickstart with a very big spring that was wound like a clock, and that used to give a lot of trouble. So it was only brought out for a couple of years. And the 125 version, which you can see over there, and the 150 version, which is here, is restored, was the same looking scooter. Let me just show them. You have to excuse everything because we have a lot of parts here as well as the scooters. This was a 150, although looking at it, it's very similar. The engine was completely different. And if I take a panel off to show you, what you had here was the basis of all the other engines that Lambretta made, even to the Spanish and the Indian. You had the main crankcase, which now had the gear cluster at the back. The crank drove from the front, and this was driven by a chain. And this was internal. You had an oil bath in it, and obviously this was a combination, whether it be a 125 or 150 200. All the Lambrettas had running on this engine now. And this came out, as I say, in 1958 for a Series 1. And they ran this only for a short time, because basically the problem they had with the Series 1 is, if you look at it, when you turned the steering, the headlight didn't. So as you went round a bend, you were turning around but the headlight was facing. So they very quickly bought, this was made for 18 months, and they very quickly bought it out. And then you had the Series 2 range, which you had again a 125, a 150 and 175. The TV 175, which is the sort of top of the range version. You had shock absorbers on it, you had a more powerful engine, a dual seat. Still the same type of engine as the other one, the same 4-speed gearboxes, different ratios but the same setup. That was the Series 2. This was made from sort of late 59 to 61, 62. Then after the Series 2s, you went to the Series 3s then, which was, they did a lot of what we call a slim style scooter. This is an LI 150 Series 3. And then they did, at the same time, they did a range of SX 150s, which are here, and an SX 125. And then again, a very, very classic scooter. You'll see on the top of this is an SX 200. Now that's a really classic scooter, very rare, very sought after. So they made the SX 200, then this went on till about 69, 70, and they brought out the GP range then. And again, you had a 125, a 150, and this one, a unique scooter in itself. This is a GP 150, but it's only done about 276 miles from new. Everything's original on it, and this is the nicest example of original scooter I've ever seen. So rare to find one in this condition, and especially a British one. And then this would have finished the Lambrettas in the way Lambrettas were being built. This one here is a 200 GP, but an electronic. If you see the sticker on there, this was the electronic for the ignition, only for the points, not electric start or anything. Lambretta did that and finished in 58. So now this is a 200cc scooter. They modified the crankshaft, a bigger, thicker crankshaft flywheel with electronic ignition rather than points, a nice pickup and a contact. They also did a whole range of 3-wheelers. They started off in 1948 with this one. It's very cluttered, but you can get the basic gist of it. This is an FB, which is basically the back end is the same as the B models, but the front, you steer the 2 front wheels. This is only a 125cc. As you can see, this was for ice creams, but you could carry a flat box or whatever. You can carry coal, whatever they wanted to do. So it was very, in Italy, a lot of people used to posh around on these little things. And then this came out. This is an FD version. This is about 57, 58. and now the steering is just one wheel at the front like a conventional scooter, an axle at the back with a little drive shaft with 2 rubber donuts on it. And they made this in lots of versions with a cab or with not a cab, flatbeds and extensions, whatever. The name Lambro comes from the river Lambro, which actually runs through the site in Italy where the scooters were made. This one here is the 175cc. Got the same controls as a scooter. You've got a 4-speed gearbox, but you've now got a cab, you've got a windscreen wiper, so you've got doors, you've got weather protection. In Italy, most people took the doors off, it was an option. This is a different setup with a box with 2 doors, and they had roller shutters or whatever. Now, one set of scooters I've missed out altogether is what they call the J range. Now, this was a range of scooters bought out in the mid-60s. It never really caught on in England. In fact, they were bought out for the ladies. But however, in Italy, they had the J50, which was the same body but a 50cc engine. Now, this was very popular because obviously 50cc mopeds were very cheap in Italy. In fact, they didn't even run a number plate on them. So a lot of people had a 50cc. So in Italy, they sold well. In this country, they didn't. And there's a range of them here. There's a 100cc, a 125, and a Starstream. But nowadays, not really very collectible, but nice. Another thing here that's interesting, we'll show you. This is another SX200, but as far as we know, it's the earliest one we know of. And at the moment, nobody knows of an earlier version. So interesting to have, and something obviously I don't want to sell.